Welcome to Should I Read It? Should I Read It is a weekly podcast that takes a deep dive into books. I'll provide a summary of the book and tell you how the ideas in the book relate across all the books we've covered so far. Welcome to episode 24 of Should I Read It? Today we're going to look at Captivate by Vanessa Van Edwards. Have you ever wanted to be less awkward in social situations? Wanted to be not the one that's holding a drink in solitude as you try to network? Want to be able to read the little expressions that people use as they talk to you? Well, then Captivate by Vanessa Van Edwards is here for you. Edwards is going to try and take the mystery out of human behavior so that you can be better at communication. Here's a quote from her. "We have streamlined all of our best findings into a universal framework that makes up this book. Each chapter of Captivate will teach you one of the 14 behavior hacks. These are simple, powerful tools that you can use to level up your career, improve your relationships, and increase your income. The first part of Captivate is all about helping you master the first 5 minutes of an interaction. Part 2 is going to teach you the skills you need to get to know someone better over the first 5 hours of your relationship. Finally, Edwards spends part 3 teaching readers how to make the first 5 days into a time when you can connect deeper with someone. Edwards ends each chapter of the book with a set of challenges that you can put into practice to bring the learning home. She also provides a spot to write down what the most influential part of the chapter is. While these are decent learning aids, they're kind of lost on Kindle version because I can't really write right in the book. Now, before we dig in, there's one more thing we should look at because Edwards brings it up a fair bit in the rest of the book. The idea is that we have a PQ, and it matters. PQ is like IQ, but for interpersonal intelligence. In theory, this measures how intelligent you are about people. I say in theory because after searching, I really couldn't find another place using PQ to mean this outside of what Edwards said. To me, that means this is more of a term to sell courses that can increase your PQ than a real thing in research articles. Even doing the free quiz you can get out of the book in the Science of People site, a number of the questions felt more like knowledge of random facts than anything real. Once you finish the book, you've been told these random facts, so of course you're going to test better on the PQ scale. I don't want to discount the book and what you're learning. There is a bunch of good information we're going to get to that I know is backed up in other spots by research. I'm just not bought into Edwards' use of PQ and that her study is a reliable, reproducible indicator of our interpersonal intelligence. Now, with that out of the way, let's dive in to see what it takes to connect with people in the first 5 minutes of an interaction. Part 1 is all about helping us just as we meet people, and Edwards does this in a few ways. She recommends that we work one solid connection in a room, like the organizer, and let them introduce you to others. You can do this also by asking each person you get a chance to talk to, who do you think I should meet, and then ask them to introduce you to that person. This idea is echoed in Real Artists Don't Starve when Jeff Goins tells us that the greater access we have to influential people, the further our work will spread. We also see this in a book called Connected, as it looked at voting and network effects. And here's a quote from Connected. "One of the key findings from these studies was that the media does not reach the masses directly. Instead, a group of opinion leaders usually acts as an intermediary, filtering and interpreting the media for their friends and family who pay less attention to politics. In other words, the media appeared to work by getting its message to those who are most central in a social network." The second big idea that stuck out to me was that we should be playing in areas that suit us. Here's a quote from Edwards. "The first step in winning the social game is to control the situations you play in. Only interact in places where you don't have to fake it. No matter how many behavior hacks you learn, if you go to events that make you unhappy, it will be incredibly difficult to increase your memorability." This advice would mean that I don't need to worry about big networking events, and I don't actually. It reinforces my path to sticking to one-on-one interactions, and even that I take them walking or hiking. Edwards says that the problem with faking it is that people know we're faking it. We come off as stilted and odd because that's exactly how we feel. For me, this means I'm doubling down on these one-on-one conversations and taking the local ones outside where we can move. Sometimes we still have to go to networking events, and Edwards doesn't leave us high and dry on those. She spends a whole chapter talking about where we should stand to get the best interactions with people at an event. Short, don't stand at the door. People are just getting in. They're trying to get oriented. Don't stand right by the food. People are trying to get food. You're in the way. Here's a quote from Edwards. "When you approach someone before they get oriented at an event, they are not only more distracted during your conversation, but they will also be looking over your head to scope out the room and find people they know. You'll have a much harder time engaging in eye contact. They're also more likely to excuse themselves to get a drink, grab some food, say hi to the host, or go to the bathroom, and less likely to be receptive to anything you have to say." So she talks about the social zone, which is just after the food. People have it and they're ready to talk. If the place has couches, it's probably there. Tables, probably there as well. Here's a quote from Edwards. The social zone is where magic happens. First, the best place to start working a room is right where people exit the bar. By the time they're there, the emotional high anxiety feeling of the start zone will have died down. Drinks in hand, people are ready to mingle, if not desperate to have someone to talk to. You become their savior if you rescue them from drinking alone. If you're networking in a big room, make sure you're standing in the right spot to make this magic happen. Now that you're in a position to make a first impression, make it good. Edwards suggests that you use the triple threat of making good eye contact, using your hands, and standing straight without your hands in your pockets. We decide if we like someone in the first few seconds, so making that first impression matters. Now, let's also caution ourselves here. Both my best man and I would say that we didn't like each other at first. It's worth taking time to dig deeper with people if possible. We were lucky in that we were at a small school and thus had many more interactions over a year. But it took 6 months for us to really like each other and form that friendship that feels like it picks up anytime we meet decades later. We also see some advice on how to check your phone. Edward says that we should do it in the power posture. This means bring your phone up high so that you can stand straight. I'd suggest an even better thing is to just don't check your phone. Keep it away when you're interacting with others. Stop using the crutch, and you're gonna start getting better interactions. Now we're standing right, we're making a decent first impression. Let's skip the lame conversation that pervades most interactions. Forget about, oh, what do you do? Or, so that weather, eh? Instead, ask conversation sparkers like, what was the best thing that happened this week? Then dig in and further with them. This echoes How to Win Friends and Influence People, which says, to be interesting, you need to be interested in what other people are saying. Keep a few conversation starting questions in your pocket and refer to them between interactions until you've got them down. Then you're not going to be so boring. Remember, when Edward says that you should be asking to get introduced to others, you should also be offering that to the other people you meet. But don't do the lame introductions. Dig deep and highlight the things that others are best at. Rave about them. For me, maybe you'd say, Curtis reads more books than anyone I know. If you're ever looking for something to read on any topic, he's the guy to ask. That's raving about a superpower I have. What are the superpowers of those that are around you? How can you make them feel and look awesome? With the advice on the first 5 minutes done, Edwards digs into the first 5 hours and how you can stay in someone's mind. The purpose of the second section is summarized best with this quote from the book. While part 1 helped you hack the first 5 minutes of an interaction, this section will help you take your connection one step further. How do you get to the next date? How do you nail the next interview? How do you make a deeper connection in your next meeting? So Edward starts off by teaching us about microexpressions. We all make these and we can't control them. They're little windows into what we really think, no matter what we actually say. I've seen microexpressions talked about a number of other times as well in other research. They're a strong predictor of how your marriage will last, specifically the contempt microexpression. Contempt is when you raise one side of your mouth and it shows you really don't care about the person you're talking to. If you're seeing that or a bunch of eye rolling or sighing in your relationships, then you better do something about it because it means that the opinions are not valued and that you may in fact be viewed as stupid for your opinions. If you're looking for a brief crash course in microexpressions, then Edward's site, The Science of People, has one. Do the work and you're going to be a little bit better, but you're going to need much more than this book and their short course can provide to become a master of microexpressions. Edwards gives us a bunch of things we can do to respond to the negative microexpressions to help smooth things over. Now, there's one example here that I strongly disagree with. And that's when she says, when you see an anger microexpression around the pricing of a service or product we offer, we should jump in and justify the pricing. Specifically, the way she tells you to justify pricing by talking about your costs is a bad idea. Clients don't care about your costs. They care about the value you provide to their business. If you're getting anger, then you did a bad job of preparing your client for the pricing. There should be no surprises when you bring up pricing because you already had the money talk with your clients. Next, Edward introduces us to the 5-factor personality model, which he says has been found to be way more reliable than other options like DISC. But she doesn't spend much time showing us that this is true. Further, I think that you need way more work than what is in this book to really understand the model so that you can use it. Finally, Edwards talks about the 5 love languages, specifically the book, and she relates it. This book is crucial if you're in any relationship. The basics are that everyone speaks a specific love language and that we need to make sure that we speak the language of our partners. We naturally speak different love languages, so knowing what makes your partner feel appreciated is key to a healthy relationship. This also needs to come to work in the ways that we recognize our employees. Here's a quote from Edwards. Feeling underappreciated eats away at employees who shoulder hard projects on their own, moms who aren't thanked for cleaning up after kids, and friends who feel like they always end up hosting. Lack of appreciation is an especially pernicious problem in the workplace, and it's often overlooked. In fact, 65% of Americans say they received no recognition in the workplace this year. If you haven't read the 5 love languages, then the easiest way to tell what your partner speaks as a love language is to see what they do for you. If they're always bringing you little gifts and coffee and stuff, then they speak gifts probably. If they really want your time regularly, then they probably speak in time spent. Now, I know I said finally, but Edwards does talk about the things we value, and she makes it sound like it's something different than the love languages. I gotta admit, I just didn't see it. Value felt like a barely there tweak to love languages that I never got despite reading the chapter a second time. Now we get to our final section, all about how to take the initial impression and turn it into something that is more than two ships passing in the night. Here's a quote from Captivate. You already know how to make a killer first impression and analyze the inscrutable personality. Here's how to increase your influence, how to turn teammates into partners, clients into raving fans, and good friends into best friends. She starts by telling us to connect better, which feels like an extension of the earlier chapter on conversation sparkers. Edwards says that we connect with stories, so we should be telling stories during our conversations with others. Here's a quote from the book. Stories help us literally get on the same wavelength as the people we are with. They not only listen to what we are saying, but also experience what we are saying. Even simple stories rev up brain activity and sync us up with those around us. Again, there are some prompts for good stories so that we're not on our own. Very importantly, she also reminds us that we shouldn't be making the stories all about us. We should tell our story and then invite the people we are conversing with to tell us something about them. Here's a quote from her as well. After you're done telling a story, you always want to bring the conversation back around to the other person you are speaking with. They can then answer and send it back to you. I call this throwing a boomerang. At the end of your story, how can you tie the idea back to them? What question can you ask to hunt for their stories? How can you get them talking? How can you make them laugh? Next, Edward tackles teams and empowering them. In short, give your people responsibility over the work they do. Let them take control of their work and get out of the way because we value the work we do with our own hands far more than things we get that are already completed. Chapters 12 and 13 seem to me like two sides of the same idea. 12 is about being open and honest about being ourselves, being real with our audience and those around us. 13 addresses our desire to regroup internally and protect ourselves when we are confronted with tough situations. One thing to remember is that when we're afraid of being open and honest, nobody is thinking about you. Brendan Burchard puts us really well in High Performance Habit when he says, most people aren't thinking about you at all. And even when you put yourself in front of them to make a request and they say no, within minutes, they're right back to not thinking about you. They're too busy dealing with their own life. That's not to say that you aren't important. Just that while your story is of primary importance to you, it doesn't hold that position for anyone else. When it comes to fear, Edwards teaches us about the two different pathways that circumstances in our life can travel. First, there's the low path, which is right to the amygdala. Second is the high road, which hits your neocortex before the amygdala. Here's a quote from the book. I'm going to not do good with this name, but we'll go for it. Ledoux found that the amygdala's fear response can travel not one, but two pathways. The fast low road between the thalamus and the amygdala, and the slower high road, which begins at the thalamus but takes a detour to the neocortex before reaching the amygdala. Now, to you, this means that the low road is the one that is taken just as you're about to get into a car accident. It's your flight or fight pathway. It's that instant one. We need to work to give ourselves the space to use the high road, though. That means taking the angry client email and sitting on it for a day before we respond. That day allows us to go with the high road and have a better response. The book ends with a story of Edwards meeting Dan Ariely, who's a very famous researcher. She meets him over dinner, and she is captivated with the way he puts so many of the points she's just made into action. He engaged with each person over dinner. He made great eye contact and kept being interested in what others thought was interesting. She shows us how all the things that are in Captivate so far relate to this final chapter. Before I make a recommendation, I want to leave you with two quotes. First, you don't impress people by mentioning your accolades, accomplishments, or awards. You impress them by mentally turning on their reward systems. Remember, it's not all about you and the awesome stuff you've done. Be interested in others to be interesting. Because, here's that second quote, as humans, we so desperately want to be known. We want to feel like people get us, like we have someone on our side, like a group wants to have us as a member. The more you make people feel like they are known, the more people will be captivated when they spend time with you. This episode of Should I Read It is brought to you by the 8-Week Business Bootcamp. If you're tired of struggling with your business, tired of not getting the traction you want, tired of working overtime with little to show for it, then Bootcamp is for you. Join me to get your business back on track and still have time to see your family. You'll find a link for Bootcamp in the show notes. As always, our final question is, should I read Captivate by Vanessa Van Edwards? While there are great parts in Captivate, I think that Edward tries to turn some content into intellectual property. Take PQ as the example. I really don't find any of the people talking about PQ. Sure, we hear about EQ, which is emotional intelligence, in many research papers. I don't see a difference in them outside of PQ being something that Edwards can teach you because she made it up. I also found that a few chapters were just not deep enough to really understand the topic at hand. I'll call it the micro expressions section here. You'll have a better handle on micro expressions, but you won't be able to use them deftly day in and day out without a bunch more training. So yeah, I do think you should read it, but only because I don't have another great recommendation that covers the breadth of topics that Captivate does. If you're looking for communication with your spouse and partner, then I'd suggest the 5 love languages first. If you're looking for how to set good boundaries in relationships, then I'd recommend Boundaries first. But I'm not aware of a single book that covers both areas, among others, in a single package. Thanks for listening to Should I Read It? To support the show, you can leave me a review in iTunes or a heart or a star in whatever podcast player you use. These help more people find the show. If you want to get more reading done, you should get an Audible membership. If you use curtismchale.ca/recommends/audible, that will help the production of the show financially. Next week, in episode 25, we're going to take a look at a classic book called The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Get ready, because while there is good content, I've got a bunch of other stuff to say about this book.